Hello, everyone, and welcome to another JordanCon interview. I'm here today with Ellis Bray, who is a science fiction author, poet, and artist. He is a graduate of the Taos Toolbox Masterclass, and his writing can be found in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Narratively, New Myths, and the Sci-Fi Journal. He holds a master's degree in medieval Scandinavian studies, where he wrote his thesis on possible influence of 12th century Icelandic volcanism on retelling and transcription of the Ragnarok myth. Now, did I get any of those words right?
You got them all right. I'm very impressed.
Proud of myself. Look at that. All right. Anyway, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's really cool. So a master's in medieval Scandinavian studies. Like that's really specific, and it sounds awesome.
It's a fancy way of saying I got a master's degree in Vikings.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, especially with the Ragnarok myth like thrown in there for your thesis. So, why don't you tell us a little bit like what goes into that? Studying the Scandinavian studies, medieval Scandinavian studies. Like what specifically goes into that?
So the program was in Scotland, so it's a 1-year, 12-month program. Yeah,
Yes.
right. It was so cool. It was in
So
Aberdeen. It was in Aberdeen, Scotland. So Aberdeen is way northeast in Scotland. It's physically closer to Norway than it is to London.
Okay.
So a lot of their language is actually closer to Norwegian than it is to English. So when you hear some of their terms, for example, the word for woman is quine, which is very linguistic similar to the Norwegian word kvinne, which is woman. Anyway, so yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
a little bit of a diversion.
No,
So the program was in Aberdeen. It's 12 months long, and it involved learning a Scandinavian language. In this case, it was Swedish, so that you could at least read some of the academic articles in the native language. Then you studied the original language, which was Old Norse. And then you did a transcription course, or what is called paleography. So in that was mostly Latin, unfortunately, but
yeah. Well.
You started way back in like 5th century and worked your way up to 12th century and learned there was a lot of abbreviation because it was all handwritten.
Yeah.
And then you learned all about the mistakes that scribes would make with
That's very important.
they're human. So
Yeah.
sometimes they would fall asleep halfway through and skip entire lines or repeat words, and you had to figure out what they were doing.
Any kind of inherent biases they have, I would assume too.
A lot of butts. They drew a lot of butts in the margins. And then at the end, you wrote a thesis, which was 20,000 words or about 80 pages. And so it was our class was only 4 people, and we had one guy who wrote about names and how names were used in the family sagas.
Okay.
One guy wrote about saints, and he actually ended up doing a PhD in saints. One guy, I can't remember what he ended up doing, but he was just brilliant. And then I did mythology, and I started out college doing geology and meteorology. So I was really into looking at volcanism in Iceland, which is a very volcanically active island. And there is a website that the Smithsonian maintains called the Global Volcanism Project. And they keep track of all of the volcanic eruptions for the entirety of the Quaternary period. So like the last 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And they keep track of it based on ash deposits, and as it gets closer, and it's so cool. So I used that, and I used it and compared it to what we knew of history from when Iceland was settled on, and used it for the transcription that we knew of with the Ragnarok myth.
Oh,
it was
cool.
The academics were a bit faulty in retrospect, but I was really into it at the time. And I maintain that it was a cool idea in theory. In practice, I should have probably been a little bit more rigorous.
That's interesting. That's really cool. Um, so, is there anything in particular that attracted you to the like Vikings or Ragnarok, the myth, or that kind of period specifically, or
um, So I'm like a lot of millennials. I'm overeducated and underemployed. So I got I actually have two masters. My first master's was in English, and they offered an Old English class, and I got really into that time period, that the turn of the first millennium at that point. But I was more interested in the Old Norse aspect than the Old English aspect, because
there's a lot of influence there from one to the
there's
other.
yeah, they're very closely related. One is just Western Old Germanic, and one is Northern Old Germanic.
Yeah.
But also, Old English has been studied to death, and Old Norse has a little bit of mystery still left in it.
What is it?
So
the one of the main sources of and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of the Old Nordic is the Poetic Edda or something like that, or Edda?
Yeah. So there's the Poetic Edda, and then there's the Prose Edda. And I was absolutely shocked to learn this, that actually the Prose Edda is older than the Poetic Edda, by chronology.
Yeah.
It's just,
there's a lot of really cool stuff there. I really really am interested in that stuff.
It's so cool. When I read the poems, I was like, this is actually good. I wasn't expecting to I read it in high school. I was like, this is actually really good. I never thought I would like poetry.
Would you say like this kind of stuff maybe influenced your like interest in fantasy and like the like fictional stories and stuff like that too, or?
So fantasy came first, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately. Fantasy came first.
Yeah, I mean it's a great tool to push you into the real world too, especially at a young age.
I got into fantasy through the Sword of Shannara. Actually,
okay.
There was a boy on swim team who introduced me to it, and that was my gateway drug. And then from there, it became the Death Gate cycle, and then I was lost at that point.
Mine actually was the Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time was my first boyfriend. He was really into it, and and that was something that we shared through high school.
And that's something that I actually I like to I say often about the Wheel of Time, is that Robert Jordan stealth taught like an entire multiple generations at this point probably of people about like real world mythology and theism and stuff like that, but with just the bits and pieces that he has in his cultures that he built off of real world cultures.
It was really, really cool, because we would read it, and obviously my boyfriend had read way ahead of me because he introduced me to it, but he would reread it with me, and then it was like a 2-person book group, right?
That's cool.
It was really neat being able to read that, and it was different from any of the other fantasy that I had been reading at the time, because it had so much more world building in it, and it didn't feel like such a slog even the way Sword of Shannara kind of felt, if you know what I'm saying. That it had that same kind of feel, but not as much. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I definitely, It like where Shannara kind of felt, I don't want to say fillery, but like it dragged a bit.
It plotted, whereas
Jordan.
It plotted with a D, whereas Jordan plotted with a T.
Yes, there you go. There you go. That's the perfect example. Leave it to a poet to be able to word it. So you also said that you're an artist, or I did at least from your bio. Do you have like a preferred medium to work in, or?
I love acrylics because they're very forgiving. If you screw up, you can just cover it up.
That would be important for me.
I recently bought an iPad, and I just love doing digital art.
Okay.
And so I've been doing because it's a lot more portable than
Yeah.
acrylic art. So I've been doing a lot more playing around with digital art. I still go back to acrylics pretty often just because it's very tactile. I like how it feels in my hand.
Yeah.
Um, my best friend introduced me to colored pencils, which feels kind of strange just getting a box of Crayolas from Walmart, but you get so much fine control. It's very nice. It's very, again, it's tactile. What I like about art is how it feels in your hands, basically. I don't know how to explain it any better than that.
No,
I wouldn't say I'm, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I'm not an artist, but I'm sure any other artist here would probably agree with you.
I've some of the art that y'all have at your shows is just phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to ever be at that level, but they just,
I mean, the picture that's on this side of me, the one that kind of looks like me, that's
I
Dan
wasn't going to
DeSantis.
say anything.
Yeah, well, Dan DeSantos was our guest of honor a few years ago, and that actually is me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was participating in what we call the charity art jam. So
Yeah.
they have about an hour and a half, and they get a topic like last minute, and then they have to do a painting, and then we auction it's usually the artist guest of honor if they want to participate because it's kind of being put on the spot, and not every artist can do that.
Yeah.
And then any other artist who's in the show that wants to participate, they participate as well. And then we take all of the art and put it into our charity auction. So he texts me and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing a charity art jam thing and I want to paint you." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, sure." Go running, and he takes some pictures. He did that in an hour and a half.
What?
I know.
So did he like bring his own like supplies and everything and just
They
did
had
that?
supplies there, and I think he brought some of his own too, because I think he knew in advance that he was going to be participating in that, but not what he was going to be painting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's
Love
a
it.
like a I don't even know, like a machine of some kind.
That's incredible. I love that.
I love him. He's hilarious. He's also a really great dude. Anyway, this is about you. So we talked about like some of your stuff, but you're attending JordanCon as a author. So I mean, sorry. So what are the types of stories you write? Can we find your books anywhere? Stuff like that, other than at JordanCon, obviously.
No. So I have an agent, and I've been with her since 2018. But everything we have been put out on submission, so that's where she sends it out to editors, has
Mm-hmm.
died on sub, which is unfortunately part of what happens when even getting the agent is just the next step on the eternal wheel of publishing. So I'm just keeping chugging along. So right now we're on sub again, and hopefully this one won't die. But I just had a poem published in Eye to the Telescope, which is part of the Science Fiction Poetry Association.
Okay.
And then I'll also have a poem coming out in the July-August issue of the the magazine of science fiction and fantasy.
Cool.
So I'm excited about that. But otherwise, no novels yet.
All
But
right.
that's the key word is yet.
Well, hopefully JordanCon will help propel that forward, because we do have a lot of publishing publishers there, and that is something that I always tell our guest authors is our new guest authors, at least, because the ones that come know very quickly. It's a great spot for professional networking. There's a lot of editors, authors, publishing companies themselves, both big and small. Like Tor always comes, but that's just because that's because of the Wheel of Time and the Bandersnatch group themselves. Robert Jordan's wife and the people that worked on the series with him are like part of JordanCon, so like they support us.
Oh, wow.
And they usually give us like little giveaways to give away and stuff like that.
That's fantastic.
But No, hopefully that changes prior to the con, but if not, I hope that I hope we can in some way
I'll be
be
on my best
helpful.
behavior.
Hopefully in some way we can help with that, and so if we do want to find some of your work other than that one poem that I'm going to link, I promise I won't forget because I wrote it
I
down.
believe you.
I wrote make sure to include the link when we were talking because I will forget. Can we find any of your other work anywhere else?
So I've got some nonfiction writing, like you mentioned, in the Sci-Fi Journal, which is a journal of philosophy and science fiction. So sci-fi. Um, and New Myths, which is a magazine that does both fiction and nonfiction.
Okay.
And the nonfic, I published part of my thesis on that, so it's nonfiction.
Yeah.
And then narratively, I published a bit of memoir there. So, but I published all of that under my dead name. I'm a trans man, so it's under my former name. So I will give all of that information to you, including the names that you'll find it published under.
Okay.
Because if you try to look for it under Ellis Bray, you will come up with a big fat goose egg there.
well, we will. I'll make sure to include all of the links for all of those
Okay.
things and all of the information. I'll also put it on your bio so that we could find them everywhere. And are there places to like leave reviews and stuff for those? And
I don't know if they have like a comment section or anything.
okay. Because I know reviews are a big thing for authors, like for books and stuff like that. But anything to be helpful, we just want to be helpful.
I appreciate all that. I know that when the Sci-Fi Journal was being run by the editor under whom I wrote, they had a comment section where you could engage with the authors, but it's been overturned so many times. That's I fair. Don't know That's at this fair. Point. And yeah, sorry.
No, it's all good. That's not, you didn't do it.
When we talk about small time authors, like this is small time. I'm somewhere down here.
That's hopefully that changes soon.
I'm going to work on changing it, absolutely. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, even though.
Absolutely. So you had brought up an idea for panels on gender identity and sexual orientation. I'm assuming since it's a science fiction and fantasy convention, it was in the realm of science fiction and fantasy. Do you have specifically like if you were to pitch that panel, what would be something, a topic that you would want to be, present on the panel?
So I've seen it done really, really well recently.
Mm-hmm.
It was done in season 6 of The Expanse with an openly non-binary character. One of the Belters was openly non-binary. Mm-hmm. They have polyamorous families in the Belters, or actually polyamorous families in the Earthers too. So just gay families, straight families, everybody's just all together and loving. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin had that as well.
I love N.K. Jemisin. Sorry.
What?
I love N.K. Jemisin.
And it was just so subtle the way she did it. She's talking about one of the characters bathing, and the person has been presenting as a woman this entire time, and she looks over and she sees a penis, and that's it, and they just move on, and that's it's not even a big deal. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
There's the Trader Baru Cormorant. I know it's technically a quadrilogy. I don't know what the word would be for 4 books, but
if that's not a word, it is now.
It is now. I'll coin it.
There's the poet in you again.
But there's a lot of female love in that first book, and that's actually the large part of the driving force in that book. Even there's a little horror. Well, I say little. There's a horror book called The Luminous Dead, which is science fiction horror, and it's by Caitlin Starling, and that sapphic love is more quiet, and it's more based on control, but it's more because of life and death situation. So there's
within the story.
Within the story, yeah. But it's still, you fall in love with somebody because you're relying on them so heavily. But yeah, so there's been a lot of it done very, very well recently, and I been really enjoying it, watching it. There's also going back to The Expanse, because I could talk
I
about
really
these.
need to watch that show so much. Like I've been suggested to it every which way from so many people, and I just
The books are amazing. The show is amazing. They
I love
run
like
perfectly
90% of the
parallel.
actors in that show. I gotta watch
The books, I cannot. If you get me started on the books, I won't shut up about them. Frankly,
it. Well, Sean is gonna love you. Sean is our science fiction and or science fiction track director, so he's gonna love you.
oh, perfect. I'll meet them, and we'll just babble at each other. But there's a character in, I think, book 6, who's just very casually, again, non-binary, and they're discussing something at a funeral, and character 1 is talking, character 2 is talking, they're talking to character 3, and they're just talking about they.
Yeah.
And it's not even an issue. It's just, so he said, she said, they said.
Yeah, it's something that I said I had really hoped. So, not to get off topic of what you're talking about, I'll come back. I promise. This is just the way my brain works. So, only because I haven't seen The Expanse. So, it's something that I had brought up when they were talking about the Wheel of Time television show on Amazon, was that I hope that they do it in this type of way, where it's like like it's not hidden. Like I don't want the what's the trope, like the hide your gaze or bury your gaze thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't want that trope. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more where it's openly there. Here it is, but it's not referenced in a negative light, even by like the villains. It's just, oh, this is just an accepted thing. Oh yeah, there's so and so with their boyfriend, or there's so and so with their girlfriend, or here they come and there they are, and like and it's never it isn't used as a negative connotation. And it's not like put up on a pedestal to be different. Like it's not, what is it called when you like othering. That's perfect. I see. This is why you're the poet. It's not othering. It's just accepted and normal. And it's great to see that in entertainment. More
I
so
honestly
now.
can't wait to sit down and just binge watch The Wheel of Time. I have, because I've been kind of watching it by proxy through Twitter and just
Yeah.
watching how everybody is loving it. Have you ever been so excited to see or read something that you put it off because you don't want it to end?
You don't want it to end. Absolutely. I didn't
so
finish the last Wheel of Time book for that reason. Like I put it
so
down
I'm
when
so
there was like 3
anxious to
chapters.
start it, because I know that if I start it, it'll eventually end.
I completely understand.
So
Completely.
I want to watch it, but I'm sad. I'm already like pre-saddened by watching.
Well,
it.
they are filming season 2, so
Okay,
so
okay.
there will be more. There will be more.
Okay.
They haven't officially confirmed season 3 yet, but it's in the rumor mill, so I'm sure it's probably going to be there.
Okay.
But they do a great job with both gay and polyamorous relationships, like within the show itself, and then just even because we don't know if they're both straight. I guess Rand and Matt in the show,
Yeah.
but like where I feel like in most older fantasy, like the trope would be like so not to spoil anything, but like there's a spot where someone says, "Oh, is that your boyfriend?" to Rand in reference to Matt. And instead of being like where I feel like if this show would have came out 10 years ago, Rand's character would be like, I'm not gay, I'm a man. But instead he's like, no, if I was going to have a boyfriend, it would be someone better than Matt. Like that's his answer. Like instead of, so like, I just really like the way everything is portrayed in that. The acting is amazing. Anyway, I'll go on all day about the Wheel of Time, and I'm sure most people will for JordanCon.
You're gonna find a bunch of people at the con, and I'll hunt down Sean, and there'll just be nothing but babbling.
Yeah, but definitely check that out, and I'll check out The Expanse, and we can compare notes at the con. I promise.
Perfect.
All right. So I have been ending these interviews with a little batch of questions that I pared down from there was a show that I used to watch when I was a kid with my mom, and that I continued watching up until he passed away, which was his name is James Lipton. He ran a show called if you're aware, the Inside the Actor Studio.
Okay.
It's a great show if you haven't seen it. It's really funny. There's some really great actors on it. But he would ask the same batch of questions to everyone that was on the show at the end of the show. So I pared those down a bit because there were a lot more, but I took some that I thought were fun, and I figured I would ask everybody as just a fun little tidbit to end these interviews. So with no more ado, what is your favorite word?
Syzygy.
Okay. And what is your least favorite word?
Alleg- Allegation.
Allegation. Okay. And then what is the first thing that you notice about another person?
How they treat the waiter.
That's a good thing to notice. What profession, other than your own current one, or even just being an author, is something that you would like to attempt?
Tattoo artist.
Ooh, okay. And what is a profession that you would never like to do?
Family law.
I can get behind that. And what is your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
So you can find more about Ellis over at his Twitter, which is Flyting and Writing, and that would be FLYTING N writing. And make sure to go check out his poems that I will include links for somewhere around this video, I'm sure. And I can't wait to see you at JordanCon.
Yep, I can't wait to see you either. Have a good one.
See ya.